Well, hey everybody, welcome to Family is Forever. We are so excited to see you guys tonight. This is our second year of doing our virtual event, and we're so excited that you all are joining us. I know that there are some folks tuning in here locally in the Louisville area, but we've also got people from all over Kentucky and Southern Indiana coming in to join us tonight. We've got folks coming from LaGrange and Shepherdsville, and I know I saw Paris, Kentucky, and Illinois, Texas, all over the place. Whether you're watching us tonight on Facebook or on YouTube, or you're joining us by Zoom, we're so excited that you guys are here. And excited that you're joining us. My name is Blaine Hamilton. I am the Director of Foster Care and Adoption Ministries here at Southeast Christian Church. And we are just so excited to be able to share some great stuff with you tonight as foster and adoptive families. We want you to know, wherever you're watching from, whether you're part of our church or you're here in the community, we care about you. We care about your family, and we're glad that you're here and glad that you are connected. First of all, we'd love to get you more connected. And so we've got a mailing list that we send stuff out as we're doing events, whether they're in person or online. You can text the word foster to 733-733 to get a link and join that mailing list. So if this is your first time joining us, this is your first event you've been a part of, we'd love to get you added to that and let you know about other things that are coming up and just how we can support you and support your family as you walk this foster and adoption journey. We've also got some great events coming up at a lot of our campuses, and so you can see the website for our link tree and the QR code here. You can scan that to see about some events that are coming up at some of our campuses. We know that one of the best ways to get support in the foster and adoption journey is to gather with other parents like you are tonight, and to just know that you're not alone. You're going to hear Mike and Kristen in a few minutes talk about their journey and some stuff they've gone through. Sometimes it's just helpful to be in a room with other folks who get where you're coming from, who understand your story. And so we're glad you're here. We hope that you will get connected more with our church and with our ministry. And we want you to stick around, enjoy the content all night. At the end of the video, we're going to have Mike and Kristen here for Q&A, and we're going to give away a door prize. So Mike and Kristen are going to talk about self-care and the importance of self-care. So we have got a great door prize for a dinner card, gift card out to a local restaurant. And so we want to give that away tonight. So right now you should text FOREVER to 733-733. Sign up for that gift card, that door prize. I think our leaders right now are going to put that in the chat on Zoom as well. You can click that link. Let us know that you're watching tonight. We'll give away that door prize after Mike and Kristen's video during the Q&A. Well, we are really excited tonight. You're not going to hear from me all night. You're going to hear from Mike and Kristen Berry. Mike and Kristen are the founders of Honestly Adoption. They have a podcast, a trauma parenting platform, a community for foster and adoptive parents to connect. They are just experts in the field of parenting. You're going to hear a little bit more about their story tonight. They're going to be teaching on trauma parenting strategies. They were here live with us a couple weeks ago in person for our in-person Family is Forever event. And you're going to be hearing some of the teaching they shared that morning with us. And tomorrow night, they'll be teaching another training on responding to crisis. And so you're going to want to definitely come back tomorrow night for that other event as well. But tonight you're going to hear from them. They're just an amazing couple, got some great wisdom. They published a great book called Securely Attached, which I highly recommend. You can see all the tabs on mine. I have read back and forth through this quite a bit. It's just got some great wisdom, some great content. I think you're really going to enjoy hearing from them tonight. They are going to be live with us. When you come back from their video, they'll be here with us live to take questions from you guys that are watching. So whether you're on Facebook, on YouTube, or here with us in Zoom, throughout the presentation, as you think of a question, you have something that you want to ask Mike and Kristen, drop it in the chat, and we'll be watching those questions so that we can ask those questions straight to Mike and Kristen here at the end. So I hope you enjoy Mike and Kristen's teaching on trauma parenting strategies.
Yeah, so thank you guys for coming out on a Saturday morning early. But let's not kid ourselves. You guys are here because your children are somewhere else. And this is like date day. This is date morning, right? Listen, we know how that goes. Even if it's to Walmart, we're like, yes, just a break from the kids. So yeah, welcome to you guys. And listen, how many of you guys are foster parents? Wow, brave souls. How many of you guys are adoptive parents, permanency? Yes, awesome. It's so good to be with you guys. You guys are our people. We are in this, we are on this journey with you. We are actively parents. We're the parents of 8 children. 6 out of our 8 children came from foster care. We fostered them and then we adopted them. So, and we're in year 20 of this journey. So we've been doing this for 20 years. How many of you guys have been doing it longer than that? Anybody? Oh, wow. Oh, awesome. Okay. Is that the only anybody else? Wow. So you guys are crazy like us. Yeah, we get that. But it's really good to be with you guys. And what we're going to do, our hope today is that we just, for the next several hours, you guys feel encouraged. You guys get a chance, as Blaine said earlier, to breathe, right? How many times do you feel like, man, I just feel like I can't take a breath, right? But in this place, we encourage you just to stop and just be in this place. My good friend Jason Morris, who co-founded Road Trip with me, which is a foster adoptive dads event in the mountains of Colorado, he was talking this past year and he said, man, I want to get a tattoo that says, you are here and here is good. Because we need that, right? We just need to be present. We need to be here. But that's hard to do when you are parenting children who have a trauma history, who can take the life out of you often. So here's what we do. If you've never heard of us before, we are Mike and Kristen Berry, as Blaine said, and we are the co-founders of the Honestly Adoption Company. And if you don't know what the Honestly Adoption Company is, basically, many years ago, we recognized, much like a lot of you, that we were drowning, right? We were parenting children who we thought, we could parent them the old-fashioned way, the way that we were parented. And suddenly we came face to face with this reality that traditional parenting does not work with children who have trauma. And so it kind of put us on a journey to learn how trauma has impacted our kids and what it has done to behaviors and how we can parent differently and meet the needs of our children. And about 10, 11 years ago, we realized, man, we are alone, we're isolated, we're struggling. And we got to thinking, you know what, if we feel this way, we're pretty sure other people feel this way. And so we just felt called to start a blog of all things, right? And originally, if you've been following us, any of you have been following us for a while, originally that blog was called Confessions of an Adoptive Parent. And lo and behold, there were other people out there who were struggling just like us. In fact, before we knew it, the blog kind of took on a life of its own, and it became like this wildfire that spread around the world. People were tuning in every week to listen to our podcast, read our blog posts, and that led us to believe, you know what, to this reality that people need resources. Parents just like you need to know they're not alone, need to know that there is hope, they need support. How many of you guys are like, man, if I could just talk to somebody on a daily basis, right? When everything is falling apart, if I could just sit face to face, kneecap to kneecap with somebody and just pour out my heart and know that I'm not alone, I could find hope, right? I could just find that step forward. Well, that's why we created Honestly Adoption, because we know how isolating this journey is. And so we created a place that provides parent-to-parent support and transformational resources to help you become the best caregiver possible. That's what it's all about. When you can gain a new perspective on your child and begin to parent differently and learn how to parent differently, that's a game changer. That's how you achieve longevity. That's how you achieve resiliency. You don't achieve perfection. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry to break that news to you. This journey is far from perfect, right? That's why Jesus' first miracle was water to wine. That's a gift to foster adoptive parents. Take that home with you, right? That's our weird theology. We can say things like that on this stage because we're going to leave and go home, and we'll let Blaine take care of everything, right? I'm kidding. But you guys are good parents and you are doing great things. And so that's why Honestly Adoption exists. And if you want to learn more about us, we're going to tell you all about what we do. And we, of course, have our table over here with books and some of our resources. But here's where we want to start. We want to start, well, we always, this is kind of a bummer, right? But we want to start with our collective problem as foster adoptive parents, right? That's kind of a bummer of a way to start, right? But our collective problem is this, to question, right? See if you can identify with this. And that question is this: how do we keep going through exhaustion, frustration, and confusion? How do we keep going when we are so exhausted that we cannot keep our eyes open at times, and we're exhausted because we're dealing with behaviors that are extreme. We're dealing with children who often behave out of their trauma, right? Some of you, those of you that are foster parents, you know this, you are dealing with a system that is overwhelmed, often inefficient, right? Doesn't provide a lot of answers or insights. They just kind of give you the children and they say, good luck, right? They don't mean to, right? But that's often what happens, right? Because they're overwhelmed, they're overworked, they're underpaid, right? So we're exhausted because of that. We're frustrated because we can't make sense of some of the behaviors we're dealing with, right? Why is it that we got in the car at 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, we went to the zoo, it was awesome, we had a great time, everybody was happy, and suddenly on the way home, the plane loses a wing, and everything is falling apart, right? Why is that? That's frustrating, right? Confusion, right? I don't know what this diagnosis means, right? I don't know what FASD or ADHD or ARND. I don't know what all those are just the alphabet mixed around. I don't know. It doesn't make sense, right? This is our collective problem. And some of you guys would be like, wait, there's a lot more to this list. And I know, we know that, right? But this is kind of, we jumbled it all together. This is our collective problem. How do we keep going through exhaustion, frustration, and confusion? Because let's be honest, some of you guys in here, you are this close to calling it quits. Because you're tired. You're exhausted. You feel like you can't do this anymore. We are, along with being public speakers, we also do one-on-one coaching with a lot of parents from all over the world. And every single week when we jump on those Zoom calls, that is one of the things that we hear over and over. I just can't do this anymore. I don't know what to do, right? This is hard. This is our collective problem. So here's what we want to talk about, right? If that's our problem, what do we do with that, right? We don't want to just talk about the problem, agitate the problem, and then that's it, right? Because that's not very encouraging. So what we want to do for the next few moments is talk about resiliency, right? So this is a word you may have heard, or it may have been like kind of in passing, but resiliency is the ability to bounce back, right? When everything falls apart, when you are exhausted, when you are frustrated, when you are confused, when you feel this close to quitting, to giving up, resiliency is the ability to bounce back. So how do we begin achieving resiliency, right? Well, number one, here's another truth. It's not through education alone, okay? Some of you guys have read every book. You've read our books, thank you very much. You've read Dr. Karen Purvis, you've read Lisa Qualls, you've read all these friends of ours that are authors. You've read every single book, Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah. You've read The Body Keeps the Score, right? The list goes on. You've read every single book. Back in the day, before the world burned to the ground because of the pandemic, you went to every single conference, right? You crammed your head and your heart full of education. And you came home and you started to apply that, but pretty soon life took over and you're like, what was that one thing that one girl or person said at that big conference that you all hosted here a couple years ago? You don't remember, right? It's not through education alone. And it's not through finding the perfect parenting formula. Some of you guys have also read those books thinking, this is it right here, right? I've got the 4-step plan. And listen, we don't always help that much because in our books we do talk in bullet points, right? But I'm just telling you, it's not through that alone. It's not saying, okay, here's the behavior response blueprint. Here's the 4 things we can do, and everything's going to be fine, and everything's going to be great. And suddenly then a week later, 2 weeks later, you're like, this isn't working, right? How do I keep going when this isn't working, right? So it's not through education. It's not through the perfect parenting formula. Resiliency begins with us. It starts with us. And this is twofold, you guys. Number one, we must help our children first and foremost achieve resiliency. Did you realize that the darlings that you're caring for have a lot of needs? Newsflash, right? Some of you guys are like, yeah, we know. We're well aware, right? Your children cannot achieve this on their own, right? Your children, because of their needs and the inability to meet their own needs, are constantly behaving those needs because they don't know how to articulate those needs. They cannot achieve resiliency on their own. It is up to us to step into that space and help them achieve resiliency, help them learn to co-regulate, help them learn coping strategies that can help them not just now, but in their adult life. Something that Kristen says often, and I love this, she says, we're not parenting children, we're parenting adults. Which means that big picture, what we do now echoes into tomorrow, right? How we parent our children now and what we do to help our children achieve resiliency, learn self-regulation, learn coping strategies, that prepares them to be the most successful adult possible. Now, some of you, like us, you will be parenting your children into adulthood. I'm sorry, some of you are like, that's a big bummer right there, right? That doesn't mean that they're gonna be living in your house, because we are involved with two of our adult children daily. They don't live in our house, good news. Some of you are like, oh gosh, thank you. You were gonna run scared from this place. Like, this guy was terrible, man. He told me such bad news. Doesn't mean they're gonna be living in your house, but we have to step into that gap. So it starts with us stepping into that gap for our children. And Kristen's gonna talk about what that looks like here in just a moment. And number two, we must achieve resiliency for ourselves, right? Okay, starts with our kids. And then we're gonna talk about ourselves and what it means to care for ourselves. And not only care for ourselves, but what it means to have a different perspective on ourselves as caregivers. That's the key. It's not just about self-care. We're going to talk about that, but it's also about how we view ourselves as caregivers. So the place that we start is resiliency for our kids.
So when I think about resiliency, I think about a rubber band. I am a veteran ponytail wearer. You are seeing my hair down for the one time that's ever happened in the last 36 months. You're welcome. My mom would be super proud. I found a hairbrush and I packed it and I brought it on this trip. But when I leave here, I will get out a rubber band and I'm going to put my hair back up because that's the way I prefer it. Now, anyone who has ever used a rubber band for anything knows that you stretch the rubber band and it bounces back. You stretch the rubber band and it bounces back. And sometimes you have a bad rubber band. Sometimes you have that rubber band that you go to put in your hair and your hair falls out anyway. You're wrapping up some files, some important papers for work, and you go to stretch that rubber band and it snaps. Resiliency is when that rubber band bounces back. So today, when we're talking about resiliency for our children, or we're talking about resiliency for ourselves, we're talking about that ability to bounce back. So how does that happen? Resiliency happens in a natural way. We have a picture up here of a caregiver and a baby. So when we think about a baby being born, the baby is conceived, they live inside of their mother, and their mother meets their needs. That's just how it happens. They get everything they need from the time of conception until birth from mom. Then mom gives birth to the baby, and there are maybe people in the hospital that are also there to meet that baby's needs. Maybe dad or a grandma is in the hospital as well. So mom takes the baby is crying because this is quite upsetting. And they're out here in the real world, and you know, the nurse like wipes the baby out. I don't really know, I don't have any biological kids. I went to DCS and they were there in a pink sleeper. But this is what I gather from TV. And so this is upsetting. The nurse or the doctor hands the baby to mom. Mom holds the baby to her chest, and she begins to meet the child's needs. Over time, maybe mom is the only one that can meet the needs first, but now dad is able to meet the needs. Grandma comes in town for a week, and she helps with things around the house too. And maybe grandma fixes a bottle. Maybe grandma gets a nice warm blanket or changes the baby's diaper. Over time, that baby learns that when there is a need, the need will be met. And so when we think about that rubber band stretching, we think about the baby with the dirty diaper. The baby's upset, probably, crying, this is miserable, but the baby can't say, hey, mom, I'd really like to discuss with you the state of my diaper. The child just cries. And then the caregivers come in and they meet the need. So what happens is that rubber band stretches and it bounces back. It stretches and it bounces back. Resiliency is formed in this very natural way of having a need and having the need met. How is it damaged? Well, we just talked about that crummy rubber band that's probably out in my car, and I'm going to put it in my hair, and it's going to snap, and I'm going to have to drive 3 hours home with my hair not in a ponytail. Although I probably will ask Mike to take me to Target to get a new rubber band because I'll be super miserable if I don't have it. But we're not talking about sensory processing needs today. We're talking about resiliency. And so that overstretched rubber band is eventually going to snap. It's not doing its job anymore. So when we're thinking about children and how this applies to our children, we're thinking about children who have some pretty basic needs. They need to be fed, but mom hasn't had work in a month, and there's just not much left. The child needs to have their diaper changed, but the caregiver isn't able to be there to meet that need. Maybe we're thinking about a child who is cold, but the heat's been turned off. We're thinking about the child that has the need to be with their mother, but they've entered into the foster care system. And even though there are caring adults around them, they don't smell like mom, they don't sound like mom, they don't look like mom. And so that rubber band is being overstretched. So we're talking about the rubber band that works. We're talking about the rubber band that's overstretched. What does resiliency look like in a situation of trauma? We can all agree, and we were told that we didn't need to talk about trauma and how trauma changes the brain, so we're all agreeing. We all experience trauma, and trauma changes the brain, right? Mike mentioned the Oprah and Dr. Perry book, What Happened to You. I highly recommend that. I loved the way that they talked very realistically about how trauma changes the brain. So if you weren't caught, or you could read one of our books. I'm always endorsing other people's books. It's a really bad sales tactic. So anyway, or definitely buy our books. We talk about it there too. So we can all agree that trauma changes the brain. So what happens then when that child who's built that resiliency over time experiences trauma? It's going to happen. My brother and sister are two of the very best parents I have ever met in my entire life. I'm talking, they put Pinterest to shame. Okay, it's embarrassing. I look at my sister-in-law's Instagram and I'm like, I gotta block this for a little bit because I am the legit worst parent ever. She's got activities, she meets their needs immediately. They're so brilliantly smart. They're coming this afternoon and I'm super excited. My nephews are just about the best people on the planet, and now you know. But my brother and sister-in-law have had this consistent, safe, caring parenting. They have built resiliency in their children. Now, they hoped that they would never have an experience where that rubber band would be stretched as far as it has been. But a couple years ago, they were driving home from a day in the park. They really are the type of parents who go hiking every Saturday morning, rain or shine, bad weather or not. They are these consistent, fun, awesome parents that take their kids hiking on Saturday morning. So they're driving home from their Saturday morning hike on a street in Cincinnati. They live in Cincinnati, and so there are one-way streets. They're going the right way down a one-way street, and somebody comes speeding the wrong way and hit their car up into a steel pole. My sister-in-law nearly died from that. My brother is, screaming and trying to get out of the car. The doors are dented in. My nephews are in the back seat, buckled safely in their highest safety rating car seats because, like I told you, they're perfect. And so they were safe. But all of this is happening, and this is wildly traumatic. My brother is trying to save my sister-in-law's life, trying to bust out of the doors. No logical thinking is happening because you can't actually bust a door open. He looks in the rearview mirror and sees his sons watching this unfold. The jaws of life got them out of their car, took them in 4 different ambulances, and that's a pretty big trauma. The rubber band is stretched pretty far at this point. My youngest nephew, who had been doing self-led weaning because my sister-in-law understood the importance of connection and attachment, all of a sudden lost his mom for weeks. When she came back, she had a massive traumatic brain injury that took months and months and months to recover from. So what had built that resiliency in 1 minute was gone. But here's what happens. When we build that resiliency, there is still the ability to bounce back even when something really bad happens. Here's what I know is going to happen today when they come to my house. They are going to be hugging and loving their mom and dad. They are going to be trusting their mom and dad. They are going to go out to our barn. They're going to move away from mom and dad, which didn't happen for about a year. They didn't want mom and dad to go out of their sight, but they're going to move away from mom and dad, and they're going to say, Aunt Kristen, will you take me out to the barn to see the horses? And we're going to walk out there with mom and dad back at the house because the boys are going to trust that mom and dad always come back. Mom and dad are always there. Mom and dad always meet their needs. That's because resiliency had been built in the first year and 3.5 years of their life. So when we build resiliency, we can actually bounce back even when trauma happens, even when that resiliency is damaged. So how do we do that? All right, we can build resiliency through connection, trust, consistency, and time. What my brother and sister-in-law did with their kids is stay connected. They were always connected. They're in tune to what their children need, and they meet their needs all the time. They are always present and available for their children. Connection, trust. They built resiliency through trust. Those boys could trust their parents, hands down, no questions asked. Consistency, their needs were met every single day, from the time that those boys were conceived until right now. Consistently, their needs are always met. And time. Over time, they had built up a whole lot of, I'm using the rubber band, but in my mind, I also think of resiliency as that ability to bounce back. We have a trampoline. I know, don't tell anyone. It was a terrible decision, but honestly, on kid like 7, we lost all ability to make wise choices. So we have a trampoline. So when I think about resiliency, I think about that ability to bounce back. So when something hard happened, there was that soft landing for my nephews. They could bounce back because over time, all of that resiliency had been built up. All right, so we're talking about ourselves. And a lot of times as parents, we're doing the thing. We're reading all the books. We're going to all the conferences. We're watching all the videos. We're doing all the research. And we're really trying to create this sense of resiliency in our own home. But then we go to church. Then we go to the neighbor's house for a cookout. Then we go to school. And we realize that we are not enough to create this resiliency. We need to create environments of resiliency, places where our children can also bounce back. And so we want an environment that promotes safety. Every place we're going with our children, whether that's school, the neighbor's house, our home, it needs to, I was going to say scream safety, and now I can't come up with another word because I don't have my thesaurus. Don't scream safety at your kids. Use another word. If you've got a thesaurus on your phone, come up with another one for me. All right, so we want the whole environment to say softly and patiently, it is safe here. Don't scream it. All right, so everything about that environment is safe. If you have read anything by Karen Purvis, she uses the phrase felt safety. We know we're safe. We know we have smoke detectors, and we know we have alarms on the door. We know we have locks. We know we have plenty of toilet paper. The kids coming into our home don't know that. So everything in the environment needs to confirm that this is safe. Everything in our environment needs to be, I'm back, consistent. We need to meet our kids' needs over time. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. We really believe in keeping our kids' privacy private. So I will just say that over 20 years of parenting and 23 foster children coming through our home, that we've had a handful that did not have their needs met in some pretty basic ways, like food. So those children came into our home not believing that food is going to exist, not believing that the next meal is coming. So consistency is key here. We're providing safety. We're also meeting needs consistently. And for some of our kids, that could be a lifelong need, that they have a lifelong uncertainty, but they should know that we will always meet the need. So we may have a child that is really concerned about food, but we feed them at a regular time every day. Anytime we notice that there's a little bit of stress, we open that refrigerator and we say, hey, remember, there's plenty here. I promise there will always be plenty here. Would you like to help me make dinner tonight? I'd love to have your help. Hey, do you want to go to the grocery store with me? Let's go there together, and we'll put a few things in the cart that you really love. So we're consistently meeting that need over time. And lastly, trust. Our environment should show our children that we are trustworthy, and that the adults that we invite into their life are trustworthy as well. So when we're talking about school, we're talking about church, we're talking about the neighbor's house, we're being extra intentional to invite that larger community in a way that builds trust.
So we know that we have to help our children achieve resiliency. We need to step into that gap. But the second part of resiliency has to do with us personally, and how we view our children, how we care for ourselves, and then also how we view ourselves. So a couple of things we want to talk about, 4 things in particular, as we round out this particular time frame. Is we want to talk about a shift in our perspective on our children. Number 1. Okay. Number 2, shifting our perspective on ourselves. And then we want to get into, and this is a buzzword, right? This is a word that can kind of create anxiety for foster adoptive parents. Self-care. Yikes, right? We know we need to take better care of ourselves. We know that, right? But we're so dang overwhelmed. We don't know where to begin, right? And then finally, and this may be something totally foreign to you, self-compassion. Right? So it begins with shifting our perspective on our children. You guys, you are parenting children who have a trauma history. You know that, right? You're parenting children who have extreme behaviors. You also know that. But here's something that happens to us as caregivers who are consistently dealing with extreme behaviors, meltdowns, rage, you name it, right? We often can get lost in the weeds, and we lose perspective on what's really going on, right? We know that trauma changes the brain, and we know that a trauma history often dictates present behaviors, right? Your child is expressing an unmet need through behavior. Now, here's what I mean by getting lost in the weeds. Some of you would say, yeah, but I've been their parent, their caregiver for 10 years. They're just being rotten. They're just trying to ruin my day. I know this because these are the messages we get all the time, every single day. I know you said it's trauma, but I don't believe you. We get that all the time, right? So here's what we often see with our children, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? We often see greedy, lying, manipulation. That's a big one, isn't it? Stealing, fear, aggression, class clown. Anybody get called in for the class clown? Yeah. All I'm saying is I hope he is a stand-up comedian someday and makes millions and gives me a cut, right? because we have been in more like emergency
We're gonna be the
school
butt of all
counseling.
his jokes,
We
though.
really are. He's going to be like this one.
We'll
Yeah.
just have to lay low and not watch it.
Exactly, right? You're raising the class clown. You're like, oh my gosh, if I have to go in and meet with one more blessed teacher, right? Because my kid was the ringleader. Class clown behavior, it's trauma behavior. Hoarding, right? Hoarding stuff, hoarding food. I can write an entire book on the conversations that I've had about food hoarding and what to do when, and oh my gosh, they stashed an entire chicken under their bed. That's a true story. I'm not going to tell you all the details. It doesn't happen with our family, but true story. Full chicken under the bed. It was left there for several weeks, right? What do you do with that, right? Guys, this is the stuff that'll make your blood boil, right? Am I right? It makes your blood boil because, especially for the parent, especially when you have a child in your home that you have had in your home for years. It's a little more understandable when you've been at this for a year or so. But when you have the child who consistently behaves with these extreme behaviors for years now, right? You're like, what on earth is going on, right? Entitled, right? I mentioned our adult children, that we're still involved. Part of what we deal with is entitlement, right? And they live in a culture that is I want it, give it to me now, I got it. Right? You can't really fault them all that much, but it's exhausting. This is all we see sometimes. We get lost in the weeds, and these are the behaviors we see, and we step back and we think, oh my gosh, this is just a rotten little kid trying to ruin our life, right? I mentioned the trip to the zoo earlier, right? Everything was great. What's your problem? That's what you want to say to your child. Everything was great. I gave you everything at the zoo. Right? I shouldn't have because it's filled with dye and processed sugar and it's terrible for you, but I still gave it to you. And you're acting like a monster. That's what you want to say. Maybe some of you do say it, and that's okay if you do. I'm just going to put your mind at ease, right? Let's just be real here. Defiance, the fight, flight, or freeze, right? The child who suddenly, at the drop of a hat, they're running from your house, right? Or like we parented a child years ago that would it's like the little rainbow wheel of death on your MacBook if you have a Mac, right? The machine is frozen up, something's intense, and all of a sudden the child just stands there, right? And you're trying to get a response from them. And if you were like us, before we got our act together, we would lecture because we wanted that response, right? This in the weeds, guys, let's just be honest here. We are exhausted, we are frustrated, we are confused, we are defeated, we are this close to giving up, and sometimes this is all we see. It's okay if even this morning, it's okay if 5 minutes before you walked in, everything was melting down and you're thinking, this is awful. And this child is awful, right? That we feel that way because we get lost in the weeds. This is what we see, but this is what's really happening with your child. Kristen actually drew that as an illustration to bring it into perspective. I know you're dealing with a child who pushes you beyond your limits. And you're thinking, God, I know you said you wouldn't give me more than I could handle, but are you sure about that? Are you sure you haven't given me too much? I saw a meme a couple of months ago from somebody that said, I know that no weapon formed against me shall prosper, but it's looking like these weapons are about to prosper. You feel that way, right? But the reality is that our children, because of their trauma history, will often behave the unmet need. And you may be caring for this child for 10 years, 15 years, like us. We are carrying our 21-year-old still. All of her needs have been met to the best of our ability for the last 2 decades. And still, she behaves unmet needs. And we have to consistently show up for her and meet those needs. This is what's really going on with your child. It's hard to see it when you're in the weeds, but we have to shift our perspective and start training and coaching ourselves to step back when those extreme behaviors happen and remind ourselves this is not a bad child behaving badly. This is a child who has experienced significant trauma and they haven't learned to meet their own needs. They're often in survival mode. They're trying to behave their unmet needs. They're trying to meet their unmet needs the best way they can, and the only way they know how to is to behave it, right? Just simply reminding yourself of that changes the game, right? Real quick, I want to give you a real quick illustration. You all seen The Wizard of Oz, right? Is anybody not? Anybody brave enough to raise your hand and say, I am so un-American, I have not seen The Wizard of Oz? Well, if you haven't seen The Wizard of Oz, I'm straight up about to spoil the ending for you, or close to the ending. So, Scarecrow, Cowardly Lion, Dorothy, Tin Man finally make it in to see the wizard, right? And they get into the chambers, the wizard chambers, and what do they see? They see this awful, fire-breathing, horrid face in the clouds, right? And they're trembling, right? It's terrifying, right? But if you remember the scene, you know what I'm about to say, right? But in the process, what happens? Little Toto, Dorothy's little dog, right, trots over and pulls back the curtain, and what we actually see is this kind, gentle, grandfatherly man. So what we see before us is this, what they see is this awful fire-breathing face, but what's really going on behind the curtains is something completely different. And that is an illustration for you to take home when it comes to your child's behavior, right? When you get lost in the weeds, simply saying to yourself, this is trauma behavior. Just even whispering that to yourself changes how you respond to it. Because what you want to say is, will you stop? Or you want to say, what is your problem? The truth is they may not know what their problem is. They may not know what's wrong with them. There's just this cocktail of feelings just swimming around in them. They don't know how to make sense of it, right? There's no such thing as a bad kid. You may disagree with me, but it's true when you change your perspective on your child.
One of the things that we talk about a lot at home is that there is, shouldn't we have done it right by now? Really, shouldn't this be going better than it is? But when we shift our perspective on our child and we remember all that has happened, all that has led up to us, it helps us to have resiliency ourselves, because we may get the pushback. We may get the smelly food under the bed, or we may get the child who keeps telling the school that we have no forks or something. We have forks, don't worry, it's fine. But we may be getting that, and we start to feel stretched to our limit. But when we shift our perspective on our kids, we're telling ourselves, this is something else. This is a child behaving out of trauma. It helps us to bounce back into the role that we know we're supposed to be in. Secondly, we're shifting our perspective on ourselves. I don't know about you guys. Sadly, I discovered that I'm a 1 on the Enneagram. It means that I would really like things to be just so, and then I'm super hard on myself about that. So that's not fun. I was hoping I was going to be like the artsy one or the something. No, I went over it about 100 times, and then I was super critical of myself when I got the 1, and then I was like, oh, I guess that probably means I'm a 1. So when I shift a perspective on myself, I ask myself, what do I bring to the table? What did I already come into this relationship with? I came with my own history, my own trauma, my own culture, and I brought that all into this relationship with my child. I brought my own personality into this relationship with my child. I'm no master of the Enneagram, but I bring that up because it's something I've been thinking about a lot. When I start to be overly critical with myself, I say, you know what? That might just be the personality I was born with. And there are a lot of good things about that personality, but maybe this hard part of it is overshadowing some of the good things that I'm doing right now. So what did I bring with me into this relationship? I brought all of me. Understanding where I'm coming from actually helps me to bounce back, because I can say, right, I may be thinking this because I grew up hearing this from my mom and dad. Maybe that's not really what's going on right now. Or I may think, I may be doing a certain behavior and thinking I'm going to get a specific outcome, but I have to remember that that's my culture speaking, that's my upbringing speaking, that's my personality speaking. So understand yourself and what you've brought to this relationship. Secondly, understand what we have control of and what we do not have control of. Mike and I have brought up a couple times that we have adult children. You can't control another adult. I don't know if you didn't know this. We could try, like I would like to meet you all at the back door as you're leaving, and I'll just give you like some really solid adult advice. I don't think that you would enjoy that, probably. Maybe you'd say, who the heck is this person telling me how to manage my finances and when I should turn in my stuff for my health care and which job I should have and how much money I should have saved and how often I should clean my own apartment? Turns out we don't have control over other people. We don't actually have control over any other human. So when we can begin to shift our perspective and say, like, well, then what do I have control over? I have control over myself. I have control over what I do in my environment. I actually can help with my ability to have resiliency when I can put aside all the things that I can't do anything about anyway. With my adult children, this may mean I want to get up at 3 a.m. and send a really long text like, I'm super worried about your health care. They don't like that. I don't know if you didn't know that, Mom, stop, I was sleeping, like you told me to. Okay, I'm just also worried that you're not getting enough water. Okay, I'm going, goodbye. All right, so I don't have control over that adult child. I need to know what I have control over. I have control over how I participate in that relationship. I have control over how encouraging I am. I have control over how often I listen. I have control over how I respond. Maybe my child says, I just don't feel very good. Mom, what do you think it is? And I could say something like, I don't know. What do you think it is? I mean, I was thinking maybe you might like to drink more water. So I can shift how I engage with my child. I have control over that. I can lay awake at night and pray for my child. That is a good part of my insomnia right now. Raise your hand if you haven't slept in about 20 years. No, just me? Okay. So I can take the time to pray for my child, but I have control over myself and not them. There is no one right way to be a parent. This is so important. We can actually bounce back when we can value the way that we're doing our own parenting. Are you doing your best? If you're doing your best, ask yourself that. Am I doing my best today? I really am. Did I do as many good things as I could? I really did. Did I mess up? Yeah, I did. Did I apologize about it? I did. You are doing your best, and there's no one right way to do this. All humans are different. You are going to parent each one of your children differently. You're going to parent differently than your neighbor. You're going to parent differently than us. When we realize there's no one right way to do this, we put ourselves in a position where we can bounce back. It doesn't mean that the hard things go away. And often we can tell ourselves, if I just do enough right things, I will parent my child out of a mental illness. If I just do enough right things, I will parent my child out of the trauma behavior. If I just do enough right things, my child will be the valedictorian. It turns out that's not how parenting works. And so when we can shift our perspective on ourselves, we can take that pressure out of it and ease up a little on that overstretched rubber band and allow ourselves to bounce back. When we're thinking about self-care, often we've got this idea of like go to the beach, take a bubble bath. Those are awesome things. If you can do that, absolutely do that. But when you're talking about self-care, I want you to shift a little bit of that thinking as well. Are you meeting your needs? I'm kind of I don't know, I'd like to be the martyr. Well, I haven't eaten in a month, just can't eat anymore because I have to meet all these needs. That's ridiculous. You must eat. I just didn't have time. My water bottle broke. Guys, my water bottle broke. It's so sad. I don't even know. I guess I'm just going to dehydrate until I die. That's ridiculous. Keep drinking your water. So when we're talking about self-care, would you just not feed your kids? No, I hope not. That's a bigger issue. Must feed your kids, must feed yourself. Must have enough to drink, must have enough sleep, must have time in community with friends. Are you going to a therapist? I know it costs money. Our insurance doesn't cover it either. Are you looking at your budget and saying, where in here can I take care of my own mental health? Where in here can I take care of my own needs? We're talking the bare minimum. When you wake up and you've had a good night's sleep, you are much more resilient as a parent. When you've had plenty to drink and healthy food and some exercise and some good friends, you are more able to bounce back from the hard things. The hard things don't stop happening, but when you take care of yourself, you can bounce back.
So to close this time together, self-care is great, right? And I mentioned earlier, it can fill us with a lot of anxiety just because we know that we need to do those things, right? We have to shift our perspective on meeting our own needs versus heading out to a mountaintop retreat, which do that if you can, right? But to close this time, we want to take you a step beyond self-care to what we call self-compassion. This is a phrase that you may not have heard of. It may be like, well, I know those two words, but I've never seen those two words together. Let me tell you a real quick backstory. It was April 2020, right? That probably fills a lot of you with PTSD right there alone, right? Everything had changed. And I was in this place where we had just had like 25 or 30 speaking engagements just wiped off the calendar, never to be rescheduled again, right? So I felt like I started to take that into myself, like, gosh, I know there's a pandemic, but I just kind of feel like a failure, right? Admittedly so. We were suddenly, now everybody was at home together, and our kids were melting down, and our kids were, there was added anxiety and added trauma, and we were just in this place where we felt like we're failures. I'm a failure, right? I'm a terrible dad. I'm a terrible mom. We were both going through this. And a friend said, listen, I want you to pick up the book Self-Compassion by Dr. Kristen Neff. And this book was a game changer for us because what this book helped us to do was to take a step back and say, you know what? You're not a failure, and you need to start treating yourself with the same compassion that you would treat a good friend who was sitting across the table from you, pouring their heart out. Think about it like this. If you sat down to coffee with a good friend, and that good friend started to tell you about all the ways he or she was failing. I'm a terrible dad. I'm a terrible mom. I'm making my kids' trauma worse. I should never have adopted in the first place. I'm a loser, and the list goes on and on and on. You would not look at them and say, yikes, yes you are, I mean, at least we hope you wouldn't, right? You're not a very good friend if that's the case. No, what you would say to them is, that is not true. You are a human being, and you make mistakes. And you would wrap your arms around them, and you would give them a hug, and you would tell them it's going to be okay, and you would tell them that they are a good parent, but they're parenting children who come from really hard places, right? So if we would tell a good friend that, why don't we tell ourselves that when we screw up? Not if we screw up, but when we screw up, right? The art of self-compassion is giving yourself the same compassion that you would give a good friend who sat down with you and poured their heart out, right? The art of self-compassion is choosing to accept that failures and mistakes are part of the human experience. We are going to mess up, right? Dr. Kristen Neff, I'm going to jump to this, says it like this, right? We're going to end with this. Self-kindness, by definition, means that we stop the constant self-judgment and disparaging internal commentary that most of us have come to see as normal. It requires us to understand our foibles and failures instead of condemning them. It entails clearly seeing the extent to which we harm ourselves through relentless self-criticism and ending our internal war. But, she says, self-kindness involves more than merely stopping self-judgment. It involves actively comforting ourselves, responding just as we would to a dear friend in need. And I'm going to end with this, and then Blaine's going to come up and give you guys next steps. This is something you hear us say all the time. If you're part of our Oasis community, we close every email, most of our video content with this, that you are a good parent and you are doing great things. But you say, I don't believe you. I'm not. And I would tell you this, yes, you are. Why? Because you're here. You're here. You're here to get to do better as a parent, to learn, to grow. And you are showing up for kids every single day, even through mistakes, even through failures. You show up. You are a good parent, and you're doing great things.
Well, man, I hope that you guys got a lot out of that. I know that those of us who were there in person a couple weeks ago really enjoyed hearing from Mike and Kristen. And so I'm excited for you guys tonight because Mike and Kristen are here live with us. And so they're coming to us from up in Indiana. So we're zooming in together here tonight. And so they're here with us. And so we'd love to hear some questions from you guys. So if you're on Facebook, on YouTube, on Zoom with us tonight watching, if you have some questions, some things you're curious about resiliency, about self-care, about self-compassion, we'd love to hear those. And so Mike and Kristen, thanks for being here tonight, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Good to be here.
Yeah, I know we're keeping you all up late, and I apologize for that, but I'm glad you guys are here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's okay. We'll sleep in a little bit. Maybe.
Yeah.
No, we won't.
Well,
there's no sleeping in this house.
Who sleeps
Like
in?
the
I don't know
kids'
what that
school
is.
is just going to say, it's not that late.
It's not.
Yeah,
Actually,
it's
that
not
was really
that
sweet of you, but it's really not that late.
So yeah, thanks for joining us in person a couple weeks ago and talking about these topics. I do think like that core value of just thinking about resiliency and its importance to our families is just a core piece of kind of where we have to start with our families and where we kind of have to just a launching off point for our families. I know as folks are maybe sending in some questions by chat, like one of the questions I had for you guys is, one of the things that you guys talk about with resiliency is it's real easy to structure that at home. That I think a lot of us have done as best we can of like figuring out, okay, what are the triggers for our kids? What are the things they need to feel safe and feel secure? And we set up all kinds of ways of figuring out the timing of things and the ways to do things to keep our kids safe at home. But you guys, you mentioned it a little bit in the video of just the importance of finding safe spaces and places as we think about church and school and places once kids leave our home. Like a lot of times that's the place where our kids get a little bit set off and have problems bouncing back easier. What are some ways that you guys think about, like how do we find partners in, how do we build up some partners in finding kind of resilient, I'll call them resilient environments, I guess, for our kids as they kind of leave our house and they're going out into other spaces?
So,
go ahead.
Okay. All right. So we just have to remember that we are our child's number one advocate. Even as a foster family, we are their number one advocate for the time that they're in our home. And so when we're looking for those resilient spaces or those people to partner with us in those spaces, we have to take this posture of education, of resource. And so let's say, for example, we're going into the church. We're going to have to always balance that privacy versus, you're on a need to know basis and here's what you need to know. Yeah. So let's say we're coming into the church. We may talk with the children's pastor. We may talk with a Sunday school teacher, and we're going to pull those people in with us on the same team. And so we're going to say something like, I'm sure that you have heard a little bit about, childhood trauma and how that can affect, how a child functions in the world and the filter through which they see everything. Our child has experienced some trauma. And so we want to help you to be the most successful in Sunday school or the children's ministry. And so then we're going to give just a couple ideas. So we're going to listen because that person really may have a lot of information. They may know a lot about childhood trauma. And so we'll find that we had a resource that we didn't even know. If that person doesn't, then we're opening the door to say, would you be interested in hearing anything that works for us at home? Or we might say something like, I don't know why hoodie is popping up. I have a child that wants to wear their hoodie all the time. This caused a problem at school because the teacher thought that was disrespectful. But the hoodie really made my child feel safe. And so we might be saying to the Sunday school teacher, the children's pastor, here's what works at home. And we're going to make sure to send our child with this hoodie. I know that maybe in church we always want to take our hats off or our hoodies off, but we're asking that you not have our child take their hat off. Remember, every time you see our child wrapped up in their hoodie, that this is a way that they are feeling safe, that they are kind of bringing along with them the safety of home. When we're bringing along the safety of home, so if we're talking about transferring that resilient environment of home to church or to school or to ride in the car, there are all kinds of things that we can do to prepare for that. That could be something as simple as, you're going to go do the school play. I know you're feeling nervous about it, and I think you can do it. But if you're feeling nervous up on stage, I'm going to give you a little something to keep in your pocket. This could be anything. I'm on Mike's desk. Oh my gosh, there's a lighter. Don't give your kid a lighter. I have a lighter on here. A lighter and some Tums. I'm giving away all your secrets. So, we might say like, oh, I've got this special pen. And I know you're about to go up on stage to do your school program. And I know it's making you feel a little nervous. I want you to just tuck the pen in your pocket. And if you feel nervous while you're up on stage, I want you to reach your hand in your pocket. I want you to touch a special pen. And I want you to remember Mom and Dad are waiting right there for me in the audience. So, and that's not every situation, but knowing that we're the number one advocate, we actually need to view every other environment we go into through that lens that our child is viewing it through, and try to prepare them to start to take some of that safety from home along with them as they go out into the world.
Yeah, that's good. I don't think I'd add anything to that. I think that was perfect. Yeah. Perfect answer.
I like that. I like that a lot. I think that's really good. We have a question here from Sarah, and I think this is a question that I hear a lot from families that I work with. So I think there are probably a lot of other families who are thinking the same question too. But her question is, how do you understand what is trauma behavior and what might just be typical behavior? That it sometimes can be easier with a child that's maybe older and we know more of their story and their history to know, okay, I know what their story is and I know where these behaviors might be coming from. But especially, she mentions having like a 10-month-old child that came in their home pretty early and not knowing a lot of his story to know kind of what might be coming out that is connected to trauma as a part of their story. So what would you guys say back to that kind of question?
We get that all the time.
Yeah, we get it all the time. And I think one thing I would say to Sarah and to anybody who has this question who's listening is you have to remember that there's an origin to all behavior. So at all human behavior, I feel at peace right now. There's a reason why I feel at peace, right? If I feel happy, there's a reason why I feel happy. So you have to look at your children's behavior through the same lens, that there's an origin to this behavior, right? When you factor in a trauma history, whatever the trauma history is, it is highly likely. It's not necessarily like 100% the case, but it's highly likely that their trauma history is dictating the behaviors you see, right? So I used to say, like, let's just assume that it's that this is something related to trauma, and I got a little bit of pushback with that, but we kind of lean towards that direction, right? That if your child has gone through some level of trauma and you are seeing behaviors, especially if you're seeing behaviors consistently, you can pretty much assume that this is trauma behavior, right? That this is coming from trauma, right? Now, developmentally, as the child grows older, there may be some developmental stages that you can, like a 13-year-old is going to be moody, right? We know that, right? But I think that's one reason why we often coach parents to become a detective, right? To ask bigger questions with their children. Now, I know you're talking about a 10-month-old, and I think really when we're talking about a 10-month-old, you can't reason with a 10-month-old. You can't dialogue with a 10-month-old. You don't.
Right.
You can't, like at Blaine, as you just said, they can't express their needs, or you don't know all the story. All of the storylines, but I think it's important to I had a thought in my mind.
maybe you can pick up the thought that I had.
I don't know if I can pick up your thought.
I had this like really great thought in my mind, and I was like,
I don't know what it was.
We're going to bring it home with this one. But then it's gone. It's just gone.
Well,
it's gone.
It's
because it's 9:05.
It's past his bedtime.
It's past my bedtime,
no,
guys.
I think that where you're going with that is right. We're human, so we have human behaviors. And trauma is the lens through which we see everything once we've experienced a trauma. So it is the thing that, you may have a kid who does not like tuna fish, and they just don't like tuna fish. This is a real thing. Or you may have a kid who, was standing in the kitchen with mom who was fixing a tuna fish sandwich when the cops came and removed the child from the home. So those are, both and. Maybe we just don't like tuna fish. Maybe tuna fish is a trigger, and we may not know the answer to that. So when we have a 10-month-old who's having some behavior that is concerning, maybe they're fussy, they're cranky, they want to be carried all the time. They're not sleeping, they're not eating really well. That can be a 10-month-old thing. So we're going to start to go through the list. Is this child allergic to something? Is something really uncomfortable? Is the bedroom too hot? Are their clothes uncomfortable? Do they have some sensory needs? We're all going to ask that if we have a 10-month-old. Biological, adopted, foster, we're always going to go through that checklist. We just know that as foster and adoptive parents, that trauma is a part of that checklist. So we're also asking ourselves, was there ever a time that this child was maybe alone? Was there ever a time that this child was hungry? Is it possible that me laying the child down for bed is a trigger of the time that the child lost mom and dad?
Disrupted attachment,
right?
too.
So you've got it's always on your checklist.
Yeah, with
sure.
a 10-month-old, not knowing your story, Sarah, but I'm willing to bet that this is a child that was with a primary caregiver, but then that was disrupted. Then this child ended up in your home. That disrupted attachment can cause a lot of significant behaviors because attachment is formed in those early years. That's the biggest. That's probably the primary stage of life where attachment is being formed, and that's why you may see a lot of what I would classify them as extreme behaviors, but that's crying, fussiness, not wanting to be put down, always wanting to be held. And we would encourage you to lean into those type of behaviors because that child is seeking that attachment, even at 10 months old. They're not looking for attention. They're a 10-month-old. They're looking for attachment.
Yeah, I mean, that was, you made my point. I had this point all saved that I was going to make for you, Mike, and you guys made it for me. But yeah, I think sometimes it is this factor of like in that whole investigation that you're talking about of like whether it's a typical issue, whether it's a trauma issue, as we're looking at needs and trying to meet those needs, we are meeting the needs of our kids, which is developing attachment, which is developing trust, which is developing connection, and leading them towards that kind of connection they need with us to feel safe, right? So some of it I think is like whether we know if it's a trauma need or not, meeting that need might be one of the things they just need us to do at that time.
You should have just made that point from the beginning.
Parenting.
It's a good point. So.
Right, it is a good point.
But that's what you just said is parenting overall. We parents are in the business of meeting needs. That's what we do. Biological, adopted, foster. Our job is to meet needs. Yeah. So,
Keith, I think, has a great question too that's kind of connected to this, but like, given that he says, if all behavior is trauma based, how do you start to teach responsibility for actions with the kids in your home? And so I think, there's certainly a tension there that I think we have to hold in, but I think you guys would say like we absolutely are gonna teach, hey, accepting responsibility, knowing that kind of we have a role to play at certain points. So what would you guys say to that of kind of how do we start to empower our kids for having some responsibility for who they are and their behavior?
I think that's a common misconception is the idea that because your behavior came from trauma, that means you will not have a consequence. That's not really how life works. Actions have consequences. That's always the way that it is.
Yeah.
So what we're really doing is we're adding in another step as parents who are aware of our child's trauma. Now we are watching our child. We see the behavior. We know that the child is not functioning now from their prefrontal cortex. And we know that that part of the brain needs to calm back down. They're in a crisis state. So we need to get calm before we take the next step. Getting calm isn't the end of that story. Getting calm is just the first step. Once our child is calm again, let's say they've thrown a chair. We may not be able to get in there right in that moment and say, that's it. You are grounded. You're fixing the chair. Go get the wood glue. You're going to patch up the wall. We're not going to get in there right then because their whole entire body is in a crisis right now. We get calm. Then we come back and we say, wow, it seems like you were feeling really angry. We know we can't throw chairs. There are some things we can do instead. So we're going to have that conversation. Then we're going to say, it's time to repair what happened today. In the chair throwing example, that may be a very physical, real, hands-on repair. And that's where you're walking with your child and saying, all right, what supplies do you think we need to fix this chair? With emotions, we're going to go back and make things right. We're going to go apologize. But we're remembering that we're teaching responsibility by teaching our children how to get back to their logical thinking brain and then how to make the step toward restoration.
We always say it like this when it comes to behavior response, that your number one goal as a caregiver when your child is dysregulated is to get them back to a regulated state. So if you remember nothing else of that, I mean, that was a great way to answer that. Remember this, number one goal when a child is dysregulated is to get them to re-regulation, because that's when they can logically connect with cause and consequence.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's good. I like that a lot. That's really good. So I think this next question comes from Alex, and I think it's a good question, especially tied into this idea of self-care that you guys talk about a little bit. And so the question they ask is, what are some suggestions for building some emotional boundaries that trauma kids can understand, right? As we as parents might need to step away and take a break. For example, the example they give is our kiddo expresses a lot of anxiety through asking questions consistently, and it becomes really just mentally draining. How can we build a boundary lovingly that allows us as parents to have some downtime or a time to regulate ourselves when we know that, hey, those questions and those things they're asking are a thing they need to ask. It's part of their anxiety, it's part of their issue, but we might need a break from time to time.
Yeah. I'm going to answer, I'm going to give an answer that I heard Kristen give years ago to a child, to one of our now older children who would ask questions incessantly, like over and over and over again. She always did really well with, in the moment, saying, I'm going to let you ask one more question, and then we're going to take a break for a little while. Or I'm going to let you ask two more questions, and then we're going to take a break, and I'm going to let somebody else speak. And I don't know if you want to dovetail off of that and kind of give some context around that, but I think that was a really good boundary that you would set with this child in particular.
Yeah, I think it's really important to remember that we're raising adults. You know, it is not our goal to always be co-regulating for the next 60 years. And that's probably not even possible. I don't intend to live that long, and I'm not saying my age, but I'm not going to. So what we're trying to do is to pass some of that responsibility onto the children. So what Mike is saying, it's setting that boundary. It's modeling what that boundary is. I can answer one more question, and then it's someone else's turn to talk. Something else that we can do is to ask the question back, because there can be a lot of reasons why the answer is not sticking with the child. And sometimes we can get into that habit where we're saying, right, dinner's at 5, dinner's at 5, dinner's at 5, dinner's at 5, dinner's at 5. Remember I said dinner's at 5. Now we're getting frustrated and we're kind of damaging that relationship too. Yep. So what if we're saying, what time's dinner, Mom? Oh, what time is dinner? And then your child might look back at you like, but I asked you what time dinner is. But they might really know the answer. So, we're saying, right, but what time's dinner? What's at 5, Mom? Oh my gosh, you're right. It is at 5. And these are the times when we start to maybe pull a clock out, show them. An analog clock is really important because it teaches that, well, that's a whole other subject, but get an analog clock, point to the number. Dinner is at 5. The hand is going to be here and the little hand's going to be here. This is when you might set a timer. Right. You seem really concerned about dinner. I think that was the other thing I wanted to say there. It's okay to tell your child that you can see that the questions are coming from anxiety. They're going to carry this with them through the rest of their life. And it's really empowering to know why you're doing the things that are driving other people crazy. I'm a pretty high anxiety person myself, but when I could say to myself, wow, Kristen, you seem to really be behaving out of your anxiety. Now I have power to do whatever the next thing is. So we can say to our children, you seem really anxious about dinner tonight. Is there anything I can do to help you with that?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. No, I think it is really good. And I have one of those kiddos too. And so it is that sense of like, hey, I know that you know the answer. There's something not clicking of like remembering what the answer is or feeling certain that the answer I gave is still the answer, right, 10 minutes later. Right. And it's hey, no, you can trust. Like we've got trust, we've got rapport here. Trust me, that's the right answer to go on. If anybody's got a final question, throw it in the chat. But we do have a door prize to give away. So Mike and Kristen, I'm going to put it on you guys. You guys have to pick a number between 1 and 10. And we're going to give a door prize away to one of our folks picking here.
It's easy. Do you know what it is?
What number I pick?
Like what?
Don't I pick a number?
You spoke like we shared a brain.
Pick a number.
Okay.
That's all we're doing is picking a number, right? All of a sudden I got really confused. Like, what are we doing right now?
You were like, that's easy. Like you've got the number. Okay, so are we supposed to say the number?
Yeah, say the number. So a number between 1 and 10.
Yeah,
I do.
Okay.
Say it.
8.
See, I actually knew what Mike was thinking. That's weird. That's because you guys have 8 kids.
Did you choose that?
Yeah. I figured that's what you would choose. So Greg and Pam Brown are the winners of our door prize. So Greg and Pam, I'm going to send you, I'll reach out to you, and we're going to send you a dinner gift card so you guys can practice that self-care that Mike and Kristen talk about. So thanks for being with us here tonight. And I'm going to check over here and see. I don't see any more questions coming in. I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's session. Tomorrow night we'll be back 8 o'clock right here on Zoom, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you're watching us from. And we're going to be getting real specific and real nitty gritty. I think you guys will really get a lot out of the session on responding to crisis. Because I know if you've got kids in your home and things are happening, things are going on, when those things escalate, you've got to figure out kind of what do we do in these moments, and how do we keep everybody safe, and what do we do to be the best we can be. So Mike and Kristen, thanks for being here. They will be back with us tomorrow night to answer some questions at the end. So if you think of more questions from tonight or more questions tomorrow, they're going to be back to answer. But thanks so much for being here, guys. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We loved it.
Thanks everybody who's watching. I'm going to steal Mike's line again because I've used it a couple times. It's really, really good. But just remember, you guys are good parents and you're doing great things. We hope to see you again tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Thanks for joining us tonight.